If you're a performing musician, probably at some point in your career, you've busked in public. That is, you've opened your instrument case and stood on the street and performed for tips. When I was much younger and playing in a small bluegrass band, my buddies and I couldn't really find a good place to rehearse. Playing on the street was a great way for us to get free rehearsal space, and sometimes we even made enough money to buy a beer or two afterwards. There are some hassles, however, associated with busking, a couple of legal issues, and I want to talk about those on this video. Hi, my name is Carr Ferrell. I'm a Silicon Valley intellectual property attorney. Welcome back to my channel. So many of the hassles that you face as a busker are largely dependent on where you're performing. A couple of the major legal issues I want to talk about are: where is it legal to play? What kinds of permitting do you typically need? And then a third issue is, what kind of copyright license is required for you to cover other people's songs, copyrighted songs, in public? And at the end of this video, I have some tips or some hacks that might be useful for you if you're just getting started in busking. So let's start with the first question: where can you legally busk? Sometimes as a performer, you feel like a hobo being pushed from one street corner to the next. And this can be a thing if you're taking up a lot of space and in a very congested, high traffic area. Of course, it's the high traffic areas that you want to perform in, because that's where you get the most traffic and you get the most in tips. In the United States, there are two tensions that interplay when it comes to performing music in public. The first is the constitutional right to free speech and the right to assemble. Music has long been understood to be an expression of freedom of speech, and there's a strong public policy to allowing people to sing and perform music anywhere in public. The tension, however, on that free speech is that there are limitations to the expression of speech and the expression of music in public. And those include a time, place, and manner constraint that's recognized in furtherance of public safety and good order. For example, we know it's not proper, not permissible to scream fire in a crowded theater. Likewise, and understandably, in some communities, there may be limitations against playing loud rock music or performance music next to a hospital, for example. So to protect the public safety, and again in the furtherance of good order, many communities have a permitting system that control and regulate where and how you can perform music in public. The applicability of these municipal permitting systems largely depend on the nature of the community and the nature of the music you're playing. For example, our little musical group was busking in Austin, Texas, which has a very strong public policy in the promotion of music and performance. Also, we were an acoustic band. Bluegrass by nature is acoustic. We could pretty much practice anywhere we wanted in public spaces without a permit. Likewise, New York City, as I understand it, is very supportive currently of its music scene. And busking pretty much anywhere in the city of New York in public spaces is permissible without getting a permit, so long as you're not using amplification. Now, if your public performance does require an amplifier in New York, you're required to get a sound device permit from the New York Police Department. Go down to your local precinct and they'll issue you a sound device permit. The cost of the daily permit is $45. Now, I haven't busked lately, but the thought of a $45 permit fee seemed like a lot, especially thinking back on the few coins that would usually be in my banjo case at the end of the day. Maybe that was just bluegrass, or more likely our playing, but I can't really remember any day where we cleared $45. It would have been tough if we would have needed a $45 sound device permit. Now, City Parks and Recreation in New York occasionally has events that do charge fees and require special permits. And you should understand that if you're going to play in the Carnegie Hall of New York, buskers, which is on busy platforms in the subway of New York, you'll need a special permit. To join the Music Under New York program, you'll need to check out the MTA Arts and Design website for dates on auditions. Yes, you have to audition to play on one of the busy platforms on the New York subway. Auditions are typically held in May and registration usually the first 2 or 3 months of the year. If you do get selected to perform on one of the busy platforms in the New York subway, you'll be pleased to know that the permits are free. And as I understand it, there are quite a few applications, and the quality of the music on these platforms as a result of the auditioning is actually pretty high. And if you're just visiting New York for the price of a subway ticket, you can get entertained by some pretty good music. Just for contrast, I wanted to check out a smaller municipality in the US just to see what other cities were charging for buskers to perform in public. My law office is located in Silicon Valley in a relatively small city called San Mateo, California. We're about 15 miles or so south of the city of San Francisco and adjacent to Burlingame, California, which is where San Francisco International is located. This little town has 105,000 people. It's a bedroom community with relatively low crime and very little graffiti. We don't seem to have a lot of street musicians in the city of San Mateo, California. But if you did decide to busk, you could do so without a license so long as you weren't using an amplifier. This is called incidental performance. It would be an incidental performance if you performed your music without an amplifier. Now, there's not a lot of information online about exactly how enforcement of this works, but it seems that you're permitted to have your instrument case open and receive donations, receive tips, so long as you're not aggressive about soliciting payment. If your music does require amplification, then you're required to get a permit from the city, and it looks like this permit to perform amplified music in the city of San Mateo is $308 per year. Now, $300 a year probably would still feel like a lot of money to me if I was a street musician. Although, compared to New York at $45 a day, I guess it's a real steal. However, to put this in real context, the business license for me to operate a pretty good-sized law firm in the city of San Mateo is $50 per year. So the next topic I want to take up is copyright law. If you're performing or singing someone else's song, someone else's copyrighted work, performing a cover of another song, for example, on the streets of New York, how does the copyright issue get handled? You're singing an Ed Sheeran song, for example, on Fifth Avenue. How does Ed get paid? Well, as we've discussed in other videos, there are certain rights that only copyright holders have in their works, and one of those is to perform their work. So if you sing an Ed Sheeran song, you can only do so with a license for that performance. Now, fortunately, most cities and municipalities take care of that license for you. They have a license with ASCAP or BMI or some other license holder in order to allow music, copyrighted music, to be performed in public. These performance licenses are not so expensive. I did some searching on the internet and found that for a city about the size of San Mateo, California, at 100,000 people, you could expect to spend about $5,000 a year for a blanket performance license for the city. This covers the performance and playing of copyrighted music in public spaces. So this is one less thing we have to worry about as a busker, is getting a copyright violation for performing someone else's song in public. Okay, now the public performance of the song is one thing, but if you have someone record the song for you or take a video of you performing the song in the street and you decide to post or publish that recording online on the internet or digitally or to stream it, then other types of license agreements will be required, either a mechanical license or a synchronization license for the use of the music with video. I'll not go deep on the synchronization and mechanical licenses in this video, but I'll do a video in the future on these other forms of copyright licensing. Okay, now for some busking tips. In full disclosure, I didn't make it a life career to busk music for a living. When I was out of college, I played with some pickup bluegrass groups, mostly for fun, never did it full time, but I did have a chance to perform, play some festivals, and earn a little pocket money playing my bluegrass banjo. So a couple of tips with respect to busking. If you are a professional, life is so much easier if you get a permit to busk. These permits are generally very easy to get. Just contact the Parks and Recreation, City Hall, or Police Department of whatever town you want to play in and ask them how you go about getting a busking permit. In many small towns, they'll have no idea what you're talking about and just tell you to go play but stay out of trouble. Generally, no permit is required if you're not going to use an amplifier, but you should still check anyway. There's a huge advantage to actually having a permit because you can tape the permit on your instrument case or on your amplifier, and if a police officer does come up and want to talk to you about your performance or why you're there, or if a store owner comes up and wants you to move along, that permit will be legal and very helpful evidence that you have a right to be there. When we would busk on the street sidewalks, we were really conscious of foot traffic and also tried to stay away from the entryways of stores and shops. Personally, I felt really uncomfortable with people walking behind us when we played, and I didn't like to play up against a wall or a window because the reflection of the music just distorted the sound. So for these reasons, we tried not to play on the sidewalk, but looked for plazas or town squares to play in that had a little bit more open space. Being super courteous to the police and to the store owners in the neighborhood also I felt was really important. For the most part, the police officers are not going to hassle you, especially if you have a permit. Even in small towns, they've got a lot more going on than to deal with street musicians. So long as you're not making too big of a racket or putting yourself in harm's way, generally the police will just leave you alone, especially if you wave at them or chat with them as they walk by. And I think the most important tip is to be professional. Most people love musicians. They love hearing the music, and they're really thankful that you're out there playing and performing and that you're working at your craft. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that we would use busking as our rehearsal time. Well, that's not the complete story. When we would rehearse in public, we would always go with a set list of 8 or 10 songs, about an hour's worth of music. We would always start a performance with the same 2 or 3 songs that we were super familiar with, that we played well, allowing us to get over the butterflies that we would always get at the beginning of every performance, and also to get used to the sound of the acoustics of the ambiance around us. And then every couple of songs, we'd work in a song we were working on and give everyone in the group a chance to take their break. And if it turns out that we muffed up a break, then at the end of the song, we'd let that person go again with a repeat on the break. But the passersby never knew that we were rehearsing. It just sounded like part of the performance. The point is that even in our rehearsal, we tried to provide entertainment, making that street corner in the town a little bit happier of a place and trying to bring a little bit more joy into the people who are wandering past. If you busk and have some stories to tell or some tips to give, I'd love to read about them in the comments section below. Thanks for being here and watching this video. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.